Sometimes one warning is all that stands between a safe trip home and a fatal mistake. Hi, it's Christopher. In this episode, we're looking at tourists whose final moments were caught on camera. From a man who tried to wrestle an alligator for a video, to a tourist who swam away from his group to film sharks up close. But first, we start with a woman who ignored every warning, stepped into crocodile waters, and met the worst fate possible. It was the afternoon of May 14th, 2022, on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe. The weather was warm, the water looked calm, and several tourists were taking part in a guided river tour before heading home from their safari vacations. Janet Mills was 44 years old and lived in Dallas, Texas. She worked as an office manager for a small construction company and had been married for more than 20 years. Earlier that year, she won a promotional safari vacation package through a local radio station giveaway. It was the biggest prize she had ever won, and she could not stop talking about it. A few weeks before departure, her husband suffered serious health problems and was admitted to hospital. Doctors performed a liver transplant. The recovery was difficult, and for a period, he remained unconscious while doctors monitored him around the clock. Family members told Janet to stay in Texas until his condition improved, but her younger sister offered to visit the hospital every day. Several relatives still felt she should not leave. In the end, she chose the trip and told family she would stay in constant contact. For several days, the vacation went well. She photographed elephants, giraffes, and zebras, and called home regularly. Each call told her he was stable. Then, on the morning of May 14th, the hospital called her. Doctors informed her that her husband's condition had become critical. I want to be honest about something. I have no idea what I would do in that situation, but I know that phone call would have made it impossible to think about anything else for the rest of that day. Janet's flight was already scheduled for the following day. Most people would have stopped everything and focused on getting home. Janet decided to join a guided river tour that afternoon instead. The Zambezi River was one of the last items on her itinerary, and she had been looking forward to it since she first saw the trip details. In her mind, she was one boat ride away from being done. Several tourists began recording when the boat docked near a closed river crossing. The guide was explaining why the area had been shut down. Janet had mentioned several times that she needed to stay on schedule. While the group watched, she noticed a local man crossing roughly 200 yards upstream and questioned why tourists were not allowed to do the same. The guide explained that the local man knew the specific safe crossings unmarked points that tourists had no way of identifying. Janet believed crossing would save time. While the guide was attending to another passenger, Janet stepped off onto the bank and waded in. By the time anyone noticed, she was already several yards in. Passengers began shouting. Their cameras stayed pointed at the river. What none of them could see was what was already beneath the surface. Nile crocodiles are ambush hunters that spend hours submerged and motionless, watching the banks with only their eyes and nostrils above the waterline. They do not chase. They wait until the distance closes to almost nothing, and then they move. The water around Janet showed no ripple, no warning. She was mid-stride when the crocodile exploded upward, its head and shoulders breaking the surface as its jaws locked onto her leg with a force that can exceed 2,000 pounds per square inch, enough to shatter bone in a fraction of a second. She screamed as she was wrenched sideways and pulled off her feet. The crocodile immediately began a death roll. This is not a behavior it learns. It is hardwired. The animal locks its jaws, drops its full body weight, and rotates violently to disorient and drown its target. Janet was spun underwater within seconds. Witnesses could see the surface churning, splashing hard, then going still. Her arms appeared above the waterline briefly, thrashing. But a crocodile's grip does not release during a roll. It tightens. She went fully beneath the surface. The water settled within moments and did not move again. The guide and passengers moved toward the bank, but there was nothing visible to reach. Emergency services were contacted immediately, but there was nothing to be done by the time anyone arrived. Janet Mills died that afternoon on the Zambezi River. Authorities determined her death resulted from traumatic injuries and drowning consistent with a crocodile attack. Investigators concluded she had entered a closed section of river and ignored direct instructions from her guide moments before entering the water. Several tourists had been recording when Janet waded in. That footage was reviewed by investigators. The family opposed its release. It has never been made public. Janet ignored a guide on a river and paid for it in seconds. The next person I'm covering also ignored every rule he was given, but his mistake didn't happen outside. It happened after the tour ended, when everyone else had already left. It was the afternoon of September 7th, 2018, at a tiger park near Pattaya, Thailand. Tourists visited the attraction to see tigers up close and take photographs under staff supervision. Levred Julian was 39 years old and lived in Birmingham, England. He worked as a freelance graphic designer and spent most of his time working from home. For several years, he struggled to find steady clients and often worried about money. In early 2018, everything changed when he landed the biggest client of his career. The contract brought in more money than he had ever earned. And after his first major payment, Levrad decided to reward himself with a vacation. One of the places that interested him most was a tiger attraction, where visitors could photograph large cats. On September 7th, Levrad arrived and joined a guided visitor group. Before entering the tiger area, staff explained the rules. Visitors were told to remain with handlers at all times and never approach animals without permission. The tigers were powerful predators, and the safety procedures existed for a reason. Levrad listened, but seemed distracted by the photographs he wanted to get. He had told people before the trip that he wanted shots. Nobody else would have something that looked like it came from a nature documentary rather than a tourist attraction. The visit went smoothly. He took many pictures from the allowed distances, but kept looking back toward the enclosures as if he wanted closer angles. And I recognize that feeling. You're standing there with a camera, and the shot you want is just a few feet further than you're allowed to go. Most people would accept that and move on. Levrad couldn't. When guests were directed toward the exit, Levrad did not leave. He stayed behind near one of the fenced areas while staff focused on another group. He found a maintenance gate that had not been properly latched after equipment was moved through earlier in the day, pushed it open, and slipped into the staff corridor beyond. He moved along it until he reached a secondary barrier beside one of the tiger habitats. Rather than stopping there, he leaned in close and raised his camera, trying to frame the animal through the gap. The tiger was resting about 15 feet away. It had been calm all afternoon, but tigers are not domesticated animals. The appearance of calm does not mean what people assume it means. When the tiger registered an unrecognized figure in a space where humans were not supposed to be, something shifted. Its ears went flat. Its eyes locked onto Levrad. It rose slowly to its feet. Levrad may not have understood what those signals meant. He kept the camera up. An adult male tiger can weigh over 500 pounds and reach speeds approaching 40 miles per hour. The distance between the tiger and the barrier closed in under 2 seconds. As Levrad leaned closer, the tiger struck through the gap and seized his arm, pulling him with great effort. And before he could pull back, he was close enough that its jaws found his neck and upper torso. The grip of a tiger's bite is designed to crush the cervical vertebrae of large prey. He screamed and was dragged repeatedly against the barrier as the animal pulled and shook him. He tried to brace against the wall, but could not create enough leverage to pull free. The claws raked down his side and back with each motion. Emergency procedures were activated immediately. Staff rushed to the scene and contacted emergency services. Despite their efforts, Levrad Julian died from injuries sustained during the attack. Investigators determined he had passed through an unsecured gate and placed himself against a tiger enclosure without supervision. Security camera footage from the facility documented parts of what happened in the staff corridor. That footage was submitted to investigators and sealed as part of the inquiry. The park declined all media requests, citing the ongoing legal proceedings and the family's request for privacy. It has not been released publicly. The next case is different. This man didn't sneak anywhere. He walked straight up to a professional, told him to his face that he could do his job, and then climbed into the enclosure to prove it. It was June 9th, 2019, at a wildlife park near Orlando, Florida. Visitors gathered around a demonstration arena to watch trained handlers perform professional alligator wrestling shows. Causal Pedro was 44 years old and worked as a market research consultant in Atlanta, Georgia. He had been sent to Florida by his employer for meetings and was spending his remaining free time at local attractions before flying home. The following day was his 45th birthday. Friends and co-workers described him as outgoing and confident. He was the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately started talking, and he rarely backed down from anything he had already decided to do. Causal attended a professional alligator wrestling demonstration. The trainer explained how dangerous alligators were and described the years of training required before anyone was allowed to work with them. After the show, Causal approached the performer and told him he believed he could do the same thing. The trainer immediately disagreed and explained that alligator handling required extensive experience. Causal said he had grown up around lakes and rivers. The trainer told him that had nothing to do with it. I think about that conversation a lot. A professional with years of experience telling him directly to his face that he was not qualified. And Causal decided he knew better. That level of confidence is something I generally cannot explain. Staff began preparing for the next demonstration. Causal noticed employees were focused elsewhere and climbed over a maintenance gate marked authorized personnel only. Staff shouted for him to stop the moment they saw him on the barrier, but he was already inside. Inside the enclosure was a 9-foot alligator named Gerald. Witnesses recorded him smiling at a camera as he walked toward Gerald. The alligator's head turned, tracking his movement. What people do not understand about alligators is that they require almost no warning time. They are not mammals that build aggression in visible stages. They process a stimulus and they act. Gerald had been trained to work with specific handlers in specific ways. Causal was none of those things. Gerald launched forward, covering the short distance with startling speed. Causal's smile disappeared. He turned to run, but there was not enough time. Gerald's jaws closed on his right leg just below the knee with a bite force that caused catastrophic damage on contact. Witnesses later reported hearing a sharp cracking sound. Causal went down hard onto the concrete. Gerald immediately began dragging him toward the demonstration pool. Alligators pull their targets toward water because that is where they are dominant. Causal's fingers scraped the concrete, trying to find something to grip. Gerald rolled as they reached the edge, pulling him into the water. The rolling continued underwater, worsening the leg injury with each rotation. Causal's head went under. His screaming stopped. Park staff separated Gerald from Causal within moments and pulled him from the water, but the injuries were catastrophic. He was transported to a hospital where surgeons operated for hours. Despite their efforts, he died from massive traumatic injuries and blood loss. Investigators determined that Causal had entered the restricted area after being told he was not qualified. Multiple visitors had recorded parts of the incident on their phones. Those recordings were collected by investigators as evidence. Florida wildlife authorities reviewed them as part of the incident report, and they have not been released publicly. The park also declined to share any of its own surveillance footage, citing the sensitivity of the circumstances and ongoing review by state regulators. Causal at least approached something dangerous. The next person I'm covering drove hours to a national park, packed a bear costume in his suitcase, and thought the whole thing was going to be funny. It was July 21st, 2021 in Yellowstone National Park. Summer was one of the busiest times of the year, and thousands of tourists had come to see waterfalls, mountains, and wildlife moving through the landscape. Tommy Price was 31 years old and lived in Montana. He enjoyed traveling and posting videos online and was always looking for ideas that would get people talking. Before his trip, he bought a realistic bear costume with a plan to film funny videos near landmarks around the park. Friends laughed when he showed them, and Tommy became more excited. The first day went well. He filmed some harmless clips and had fun. The views were decent, but not spectacular. He kept refreshing the numbers on his phone that evening, watching them stay flat and by the next morning, he was already thinking about what he could do differently. On the second day, Tommy and friends stopped at a wildlife viewing area where a grizzly bear had been spotted feeding in an open meadow. Dozens of tourists were already there. Rangers and warning signs reminded visitors to stay far back. Tommy had the bear costume in his bag from earlier. He told his friends it would be funny to put it on and walk toward the real bear, that the combination would get more attention than anything else he had filmed. His friends told him not to. Several other tourists warned him as well. There were strangers in that crowd who had never met him and still tried to stop him. I think about that. Even people who owed him nothing could see exactly where this was going. Tommy put on the costume and left the viewing area. Rangers stationed nearby began moving toward him, repeatedly ordering him to stop. At first, the bear kept feeding and paid little attention. Tommy kept moving forward. The costume was not what made this dangerous. The danger came from a person deliberately closing the distance to a wild grizzly bear while it was feeding. Bears tolerate distant observers. A human entering their space is a different situation entirely. That is why the recommended distance is hundreds of feet. The grizzly lifted its head. Bears have an exceptional sense of smell and had likely registered his presence long before it looked up. What changed was the distance. Tommy had crossed the threshold. The bear could no longer ignore. Its body went rigid. It turned to face him and charged. A grizzly in a full charge covers ground at roughly 35 miles per hour. Tommy had no realistic chance of running. The bear hit him with its full mass. Adult grizzlies in Yellowstone regularly exceed 500 pounds, and the impact launched him off his feet. Before he could move, the bear's jaws closed on his shoulder and drove him flat against the ground. It shook him once, violently, the way a dog shakes a toy. That single motion caused severe damage to his neck and upper spine. The bear mauled him briefly before backing away once it no longer perceived him as a threat. Tommy lay motionless. Witnesses were still screaming for him. Rangers responded within minutes. Despite their efforts, his injuries were catastrophic. Tommy Price died from the attack. Authorities recorded his cause of death as fatal traumatic injuries consistent with a grizzly bear attack. Investigators determined he had deliberately approached the bear, despite repeated warnings, and that the bear had reacted defensively after he entered its space while feeding. Several bystanders recorded the approach and the attack. That footage was submitted to park authorities and reviewed as part of the investigation. Yellowstone officials confirmed the recordings exist, but have not released them publicly, stating that doing so would not serve any educational purpose and would cause unnecessary distress to his family. The family has made the same request. The next person didn't want attention from anyone. He just convinced himself that a wild lion sitting 20 meters away was safe enough to walk toward, and he had just sold his company and was supposed to be celebrating. It was March 24th, 2020, at a safari reserve near Johannesburg, South Africa. Tourists from around the world traveled there to see wild animals in their natural habitat. Gary Thompson was 49 years old and lived in Denver, Colorado. For more than 10 years, he had built a small software company from the ground up, starting in a spare room in his house. By 2016, he decided to sell. After months of negotiations, a larger firm agreed to buy it, giving Gary financial security for the first time in years. To celebrate, he booked a safari in South Africa. After so many years focused on work, he wanted to do something exciting. The safari was his reward. For the first several days, everything went well. Gary photographed elephants, zebras, and giraffes, and appeared relaxed, enjoying telling other tourists about the business he had just sold. He felt like he was finally enjoying life after years of stress. More than once, he mentioned to people in the group that this was the first real vacation he had taken in over a decade. He seemed determined to make the most of every hour of it. On the afternoon of March 24th, Gary joined a guided safari drive. Several tourists sat in an open vehicle while a trained guide drove through the reserve. They came across a large lion resting beside the track and stopped so everyone could take photographs. The lion appeared calm and showed little interest in the vehicle. Gary kept feeling his shots weren't close enough. He told the guide he wanted to get out and photograph from ground level. The guide told him firmly that was not permitted. He explained that lions habituate to vehicles, but a person on foot is a completely different stimulus. Other tourists agreed and told Gary to stay seated. Gary sat quietly for a moment, looking at the lion. Then he reached for the door. The guide repeatedly ordered him to remain inside. Gary stepped down onto the ground anyway. Several tourists shouted for him to get back. The guide kept calling after him. Gary walked toward the lion with his camera raised, apparently convinced the animal's stillness meant it was safe. What Gary did not understand is that resting lion is not a disengaged lion. Lions are ambush predators. Stillness is not passivity, it is patience. The lion's attention shifted immediately to the person on foot. The lion rose to its feet. Its tail moved once, low and slow. Its eyes did not leave Gary. He was perhaps 60 feet away when it began to move. Not an explosive charge, but a fast, low, purposeful sprint that covers ground before a person can process what they are seeing. Gary registered it and turned. He managed 2 steps before the lion caught him. The impact knocked him face first into the ground. Lions kill large prey by seizing the throat or back of the neck, and the lion's jaws found Gary's neck almost immediately. He went still for a moment under the animal's weight, then began struggling, which caused the lion to bite down harder and drag him sideways. The guide used the vehicle horn and tried to close the distance. The lion did not release. It pinned Gary beneath its forepaws and bit again into his shoulder and upper back. His movements grew weaker until he stopped moving entirely. Reserve staff rushed to the area and used noise and vehicles to drive the lion away. Despite their efforts, Gary Thompson died from injuries sustained during the encounter. Investigators determined he had voluntarily exited the vehicle and approached a wild lion in violation of park rules. Other tourists inside the vehicle had been recording throughout the incident. Reserve management retrieved those recordings, and they were reviewed by wildlife investigators and South African authorities. The reserve has declined all requests to release the footage, citing both the graphic nature of the content and the wishes of Gary's family, who have asked that it remain private. Gary stepped out of a vehicle to prove a point to strangers. Roger didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He just watched a guide move a snake for 60 seconds and quietly decided he already knew enough to do it himself. It was July 18, 2016 in South Africa. Roger Mills was 37 years old and lived in Canada. He worked as an accountant and rarely spent time outdoors. He had saved for years to take this safari vacation. The trip was supposed to be relaxing and memorable. When Roger arrived, he checked in and met the guide who would lead the group. The guide explained the safety rules: stay together, listen to instructions, never approach animals without permission. The guide had 12 years of experience. Roger listened but felt confident he could figure things out on his own. The guide led the group along a marked trail. After about an hour, he stopped the group when a harmless snake wandered onto the path. Using a snake hook, he carefully lifted it, identified the species, and moved it into the bushes. The whole process took less than a minute. I have watched professionals handle things quickly and make it look easy my entire life. And I have learned the hard way that easy to watch and easy to do are 2 very different things. Roger hadn't learned that yet. The group continued. Roger barely paid attention when the guide explained that different species require different handling techniques and that some should never be approached without proper equipment. He had already decided the guide was being overly cautious. The way he felt most rules were written for people who didn't know what they were doing. 2 hours later, Roger spotted a thick-bodied snake coiled beside a rock near the trail. It was not blocking the path. He did not point it out to the guide. While the guide was speaking with other tourists, Roger quietly stepped out of line, handed someone his phone to record, crouched beside the snake, and reached toward it with his bare hand. The snake was a puff adder. Puff adder strikes have been recorded at around 200 milliseconds. The human visual system cannot process movement that fast. By the time Roger's brain registered that the snake had moved, The fangs had already penetrated his palm and withdrawn. He jerked his hand back and stood. For a moment, he may not have understood what happened. Then the pain started. Puff adder venom is cytotoxic. It begins destroying tissue at the bite site almost immediately. Swelling developed around the wound and continued spreading over the following hours, the skin tightening and darkening as the venom moved up his arm. The pain is described by survivors as a deep, spreading burn, unlike anything they had experienced. Roger went pale and grabbed the guide's attention, believing he had been bitten. The guide recognized the species immediately and called for emergency assistance. Medical transport was arranged and Roger was taken to a hospital, where he received anti-venom and underwent surgery for the tissue damage. For several days, doctors fought to stabilize him. The systemic effects of the venom organ stress, tissue destruction, and cascading complications, combined with a secondary infection, proved too much. Roger died in hospital several days after the bite. Investigators found that Roger had left the group and approached the snake without training or equipment in order to film it. Had he alerted the guide, the situation could have been handled safely in under a minute. The video recorded on Roger's phone was reviewed by investigators and held as part of the case record. It has never been released publicly, and the reserve has honored that request. Every person in this video made their fatal decision on land. This last case happened underwater. And what makes it different is that the warning came more than once before it was too late. It was March 12th, 2014, off the coast of the Bahamas. The weather was clear and the sea was calm as dozens of tourists gathered at a marina for snorkeling excursions to nearby coral reefs. Kim Min-jun was 29 years old and lived in Seoul, South Korea. He worked as a marketing specialist and had recently started a travel-focused social media channel. He only had a few thousand followers but was determined to create content that would grow it faster. The trip to the Bahamas was supposed to give him that material. He had planned the excursion carefully, hoping to film something dramatic that would stand out. That morning, Kim joined a guided snorkeling tour. Before departure, the guides conducted a detailed safety briefing. Stay within the designated area, remain close to the group, follow directions immediately if conditions changed, and do not swim into deeper water beyond the reef. Kim listened while preparing his waterproof action camera on an extension pole. Shortly after arriving at the reef, the group entered the water. For the first 20 minutes, everything went smoothly. Tourists filmed fish, coral, and sea turtles in the clear water. And I think about those 20 minutes, everything working exactly as it should. Kim getting his footage, the water calm and bright. And then he looked out toward the deeper water and decided it wasn't enough. Kim noticed larger fish swimming farther from the reef and gradually moved away from the group. A guide noticed and blew a whistle several times. Kim looked toward the boat and briefly raised his hand. The guide later said he appeared to understand the instruction but continued swimming away. Crew members moved the boat toward him while repeatedly signaling him to return. The distance kept increasing. The further he got from the reef, the more the environment changed. Shallow reef water is bright and full of structure. Open, deeper water is different. Visibility drops, the color shifts to darker blue, and a person swimming alone at the surface, kicking, moving, trailing bubbles from a camera mount creates a sensory profile very different from the fish around the reef. Motion, vibration, irregular rhythm. These are the things that draw investigation from large predators. Shortly afterward, a large shark rose from the deeper water beneath him. Sharks of this kind are known to approach and investigate before an encounter escalates, and what happened next may have begun that way. There was almost certainly no visible warning from Kim's perspective. Sharks often approach from below, using the surface contrast to silhouette their target. The first contact was a violent strike to his torso that knocked him sideways and likely caused immediate disorientation. Kim thrashed, a response that is instinctive and understandable, and deeply counterproductive, because irregular surface movement reinforces further investigation. The shark came back. Its jaws closed on his right arm and shoulder and pulled him downward. The camera pole was still in his hand. He twisted and fought. The shark released briefly, then bit again into his side. The lacerations from a shark of that size open tissue to the bone. Blood displacement in open water is near instantaneous. Kim went under. When guides reached him, he was face down at the surface. severely injured. They pulled him aboard immediately. Emergency first aid was administered while the vessel returned to shore at full speed. Paramedics were waiting at the marina and transported Kim to hospital for emergency treatment. Despite rapid intervention, he died from the injuries he had sustained. Investigators reviewed footage from tourists and crew. The recordings showed Kim moving beyond the supervised area despite warning signals. Investigators concluded the evidence was consistent with a shark attack involving a large species known to inhabit those waters. The tour company's own camera systems captured parts of the incident from the boat. That footage was submitted to Bahamian maritime authorities and reviewed as part of the investigation. It was not released to the public. Authorities cited the ongoing nature of the inquiry and the sensitivity of the content. Kim's family, based in South Korea, later confirmed through a representative that they did not want any footage or recordings related to his death distributed online or through media.